All right, Shawn. So this part of the interview is what I call the weekly wake up, which is a podcast that we put out there every single week because on Wednesday, we all know it's called Hump Day. And Wednesday is either a really good day because your week's going really well, or it's one of the most frustrating days because you only have a day and a half left by the time you realize you haven't done what you have done. So I think you're an incredibly productive person. I've seen the amount of work and things you've been able to do, from being a dad to a good husband to being an entrepreneur to working for somebody else, and all of this while keeping your life and enjoying it, which is hard. But the question that I have for you is, tell me about a time where you were kind of thrown off your course, right? We all get, life pulls us. So a time where you were pulled in a way that you weren't ready for it, and then we're going to go into kind of some of the ways that you overcame that and got back on the horse.
Sure. Well, I love the fact that you're doing acknowledging the fact that Wednesday can be rough. Before this interview, like looking at this stuff, I realized I actually Wednesday's kind of an outlier day, and that's what leads into the getting thrown off course piece. You can get thrown off course in two ways. You can get thrown off course in a big way, or you can get thrown off course in a little way. And these are pretty easy to deal with. What I noticed is I actually schedule these.
Right.
Wednesday is a day I've decided to call them, that's a scratch your itch day. So you've got your fitness plan, you know what you're going to do, but Wednesday, that's the day where I'm going to let myself drift off and I'm going to come back. So if this is nutritional, this is the day that you get your cupcake.
Gotcha.
Okay, you're going to scratch your itch so that you stay on track. These are easy to deal with. The big ones are the ones where it's almost as if you're climbing a mountain, that gust of wind comes up and it knocks you off.
Right. Almost out of your control.
Yeah, it's completely out of your control, but it is not something you can ignore.
Right. We call it the 80-20 rule of planning, that 80% of your life you can actually plan for, but 20% you can't.
Yeah.
And if you don't take care of that 80, that 20 tends to feel like 100.
Oh,
so give me a time where you were kind of thrown off your rocker. What happened and where were you?
So this time of year, like when we're filming this almost a year ago, I was making my bid for season 9 of American Ninja Warrior, and I fell. I hurt myself. I blew out my right knee, had to have surgery, and this is an example of, this is a big derailment.
Right.
Not
just of your goals, but also of your physical.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the whole life.
Like the whole life gets thrown into upheaval because I'm effectively useless. At least for about a week and a half, and my wife will attest, I was useless. But I wasn't without hope in that, although there were times where it definitely seemed that way. The thing is, when these giant changes come up, the reason why it can feel so earth-shattering is because this wasn't your choice, it wasn't part of your plan, but you have to deal with this, and it feels unfair. Like, this is not it. So one of the big things there is, you mourn your old plan.
Right.
Your old plan was a friend. You spent a lot of time with your old plan. Like, it's almost like losing a pet. Like, this is something that you engaged with all the time, so you have to mourn the fact that it's gone. But it is gone, and now we have to kind of take stock of where we're at. So where I was, I was at a different point on the mountain. I was on a completely different path, and now I had this injury to account for. So we have to make different decisions, because if I go back and jump into my old training, it's not an if, it's a guarantee that I get hurt. It's a guarantee that the knee doesn't recover well. And if you begrudge the change in landscape, it becomes much harder to climb.
Right.
As opposed to, and that's why mourning the old plan is so important, But you have to say goodbye and say, here's where our new plan, we're going to move forward. Or, and this is a perfectly legitimate option, go, hey, in light of this new landscape, I'm going to choose a different path. Maybe this mountain that you were climbing, this one can't be climbed right now in light of the new circumstance. But climb this mountain over here, and then you go, I'm coming back. I'm gonna go climb this because that's the next mountain.
So how does that work on a? I mean, I'm amazed seeing how athletic you guys are. And if you guys ever see Shawn in the gym, it's almost like gravity doesn't apply to you. I mean, he flies all over the place. I'm not surprised you hurt your knee if you fell from the heights that you go. But on, you got Monday, you got Tuesday, and we live and die with LP by the week, right? Mm-hmm. We play it with a 7 days planning is what we use, and it's been super effective. So Monday, you have your plan set. Monday's good. Tuesday, you think it's good, but then on Wednesdays, when you realize kind of your knee went out, right? Wednesdays when you realize what happened, and you're not on the track you should be on. What do you do to get back on track?
It's a really good question, and the first thing to acknowledge is this a big derailment or is it a small derailment?
Gotcha.
If it's a big derailment, then we're gonna have to spend some time going, okay, do we need to rethink a lot?
Right.
But this is important. Small derailments seem big in the moment. The one example that I love warning people about is social media. You hop on Instagram or Facebook and you see some video of somebody who has a similar goal to you doing something far in advance of your own skill level. So you're like, I'm going to do that.
Right.
That's probably a bad plan, but learning that it's a bad plan is a useful lesson.
Absolutely.
So, that's what I say. Schedule Wednesday. You know what? I've got Monday and Tuesday, they're very structured. I've got Thursday, Friday, they're very structured. Wednesdays, there in the middle, you need a day of rest and recovery. You need multiple days of rest and recovery. So Wednesday, you can just kind of aimlessly wander and go, you know what? That's the day that I'm going to scratch this itch.
Gotcha.
And because seeing somebody else closer to your goal than you are can be very emotionally taxing. And social media doesn't do anything useful in terms of going, here's all the stuff that this person has done. They're reading chapter 20, you're reading chapter 2. You have to, acknowledge it. But, give yourself the opportunity to wander outside of your goal because we're just taking a side path. Your goal isn't changing and your path isn't changing. You can do something over here and come back. What you can't do is every time you see something that, that looks cool, shiny object, you can't change your path.
So it's interesting because we have these things that distract us, and what you're saying is you know that you're going to get distracted at some point, just your personality and how you've grown up, the years of working with what you've been given. And I'm the same way, and I think most people are, right?
Yeah.
We get distracted easily, so you almost plan that in your week.
Absolutely.
And you have these times, and I do a similar thing on Friday, where Friday is my catch-up time, where I don't plan things on Fridays.
Sure.
That's my day to catch up on all the stuff that has been pushed because of life.
Yeah.
Previously. So super, super interesting. So you got back on track. You're rocking and rolling again. One thing we do with LP, and the whole point of why we built this business was to bring attention. So you got yourself back on track, and the one thing that we do here at LP is our goal is to bring intentionality back to life, and we mean that in two ways, right? The first is bringing it back to your life, and the other thing is reviving it.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of this lost thing that we don't do anymore. We're not intentional about what we do, and that's why a lot of people fall asleep kind of confused with where the day went.
Sure.
We found that our users don't have that. They usually fall asleep with this feeling of, I can't wait to start the next day. So when you're in these slumps, right, we all go in them, and that's why I love this podcast, because we're not here to tell you about the best thing Shawn's ever done. We have plenty of things to tell you about that, but here's kind of a lull on how'd you get out, and how did you bring intentionality back to life?
Bringing intentionality back to life can be a really, really hard prospect. For me specifically, it's very easy you're in a slump. The notion of digging yourself out of a slump is hard. It's daunting. It's going to be work. So you're just like, I'll just stay in the slump. But something that I noticed, knowing we were going to talk about this, going back through my LP, I started trying to organize my slump.
Interesting.
You go, okay, here's my slump. I'm just going to, but and this is where I think you got to know kind of what you need. Mm-hmm. My wife and I are very different in this regard. My wife's in a slump. What she needs, and this is really hard for me, she needs me to come in and go, "You're in a slump, stop it!" And she's like, "Okay," and then she'll wake up the next day and just completely reorganize everything, and she's off and running.
That motivation.
Yeah, well done her. She's a complete freak. I don't do that. I need to organize my slump and go, okay, I'm in my slump, like my time at home when I could be being productive after the kids are asleep, I'm wasting that like binge watching something. What I do is I go, okay, I'm in a slump, I can't pull myself out, I don't do well pulling myself out all at one time, so I'm going to say, you get one show, or whatever, and then turn the TV off, like, and I'm actually putting it in my LP,
right.
Organizing my slump, and that's the thing where if I give myself that little bit, and then go, okay, now you're going to work on X for X amount of time, I will inevitably, in that organized, like, yes, you're back on track for the next hour,
Gotcha.
I'll always spend 90 minutes. I'll find that groove again. I'll remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. I just have to give it. It's almost like that thing where you think you can trick yourself by setting your clock forward 15 minutes.
Right.
It never works. But like, it's just a brain trick. I know if I'm in a slump, I need to acknowledge that it's there. Give myself a little bit and then move forward. If I promise myself that I can always go back,
Right.
9 times out of 10 I won't.
So you basically, you acknowledge it exists, so that's
Yeah.
kind of the first thing, and then you go back to past routines to get yourself back to being
Absolutely.
intentional.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. So the other thing we try to do is we try to balance our life and bring balance into our life, and you talked about this, and any of the LP users know about our 4 pillars of success. You know, the spirituality, self-growth part, the social and emotional, the career-based or education, and then finally the physical. We kind of relate these to like our vital signs, checking our vitals is
Sure.
how I say it, and you guys have heard me say it a ton. But with Life Pulse, we need to check our vitals. So how do you bring balance back to your life when you're in this slump? You know, you've already talked about bringing intentionality of recognizing that you're in this slump and going through some routines, but how do you get that balance back of being a father, a husband, you know, being, you know, your career and your, you know, self-growth
Sure.
and personal?
Bringing balance back, for me, starts with an assessment of like which of my 4 pillars I've lost, or lost most primarily. Personally, my slump gets to be is very specific. I'll spend a ton of time thinking about business, but not being very productive, and I'll sacrifice family time and physical time because I'm like, I just need to spend more time on business, but I'm actually not very effective. So for me, bringing balance back looks a lot like going to the areas that I don't think are useful and prioritizing them, because my priorities are the thing that are off.
Gotcha. So you're saying when you're off balance, it's because you prioritize one thing to have greater value versus consciously taking yourself out of it. And that's what the LP does, is it lets you visualize and actually see it. And then you've figured it out, you've acknowledged it, you've pulled yourself out of it, and then you go, hey, you know what, being a father, I know it's important to me, but the way I'm acting is not, so now I have to get back.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
And it's almost a function of going, you know what, I'm going to limit my time focusing on business development, so I don't have the time to stare blankly at my computer and have writer's block.
Gotcha.
I'm going to prioritize time with my kids, I'm going to make sure my wife is well taken care of, I'm going to make sure my body is well taken care of. I'm not going to skip my workout. Now I know, the fitness guru guy, that's easy for me to say, like, shut up. But no, like, working in a gym all day, it's very easy not to work out yourself because you're like, surely I worked out, hanging out with those equipment. But I feel you. We're going to talk about it. But prioritizing those things and going, you know what, I can't pour out unless I'm full.
Right.
But when it comes to the business development, I'm like, pour out, not realizing that I'm empty.
Yes.
And so that's where bringing balance back comes in. I really have to focus on prioritizing those things that fill me up,
Gotcha.
so that I have something to give.
And then the last one is just productivity. Another term that people always love to act like they're productive. How do you become productive again, right? You found your intentionality, you brought that back to life. You now have balance because you figure out what you do. Where does the productive part come in, or is it somewhat natural after that?
It is not natural. I am, and fitness is similar, it's very results driven. So there's still a million things that need to be done. There are always going to be a million things that need to be done. And if you only think about the million things, that's a recipe for anxiety and worry and stress. But if you can go, I got this done, this is done. This is now out of the ether, it's no longer in the list of millions, it's finished. You put it aside. And allowing yourself to be satisfied with that, something else, but allowing yourself to be satisfied with that is, for me, that's necessary.
Okay, so Wednesday comes, people who are listening or are watching, they're in this funk, they need this Wednesday wake up, they're listening to it. What's the one piece of advice you would give to them, or action step that they could take right now, to get out of it, before we let you get going and get back to work?
Sure. One action step. Now this is going to be dependent on you knowing what you need, but being able to focus outside of everything else and look at today. Don't look at your week. Just today, Wednesday. You're in your funk. What thing can you do right now to be able to say, you know what? If nothing else gets accomplished, today's a win. Maybe it's not a huge win. Maybe it's a little W win, but of all the things you need to get done, what's your, I'm going to do that. And if I get that done, I'll be satisfied. Because I can almost guarantee the snowball starts with that one thing. And sure, it might not be the most productive day, but that's okay. Wednesdays don't have to rock. Wednesday, maybe you just survive Wednesday. But if you've never survived a Wednesday before, that's big news.
Absolutely. Awesome.